Who dared to touch a hero's flag and paid the price? Picture this. A lone royal guard, Sergeant John Carter, 42, stands on a Heathrow tarmac, 100 feet from a plane, his crimson tunic sharp against the gray sky. He's not here for ceremony, but for a promise. A vow to bring Captain Michael Thompson, 28, home. His casket draped in a Union Jack, 3 feet above the ground. This isn't just duty. It's personal. A debt to Michael's father, Major Robert Thompson, 65, sealed 20 years ago. As Carter marches 200 feet through Terminal 3's chaos, something unthinkable happens. A supervisor, William Harris, 48, dares to stop them, demanding they detour through a 200-foot service corridor. Like Michael's a package, not a hero. The air crackles when Harris reaches for the flag. Carter's hand snaps out, stopping him cold, his voice a blade. "You do not touch that flag." The terminal freezes. Passengers 10 feet away gasping. Phones rising. Strangers, a mother, a veteran, an 8-year-old girl, unite in awe. Their silence louder than any cheer, transforming chaos into reverence. At gate 38, 50 feet ahead, Robert waits, his trembling hands hiding a father's grief. Will Carter's stand honor a son's sacrifice? Who paid the price for this moment? Hit subscribe, comment where you're watching from, and dive into this story of courage, defiance, and a promise kept. Because tomorrow, another tale awaits. The air outside Heathrow's Terminal 3 hung heavy that afternoon, thick with the promise of rain and something harder to name, perhaps the weight of solemn duty. Sergeant John Carter, a 42-year-old Royal Guard, stood on the tarmac, his crimson tunic immaculate despite the long journey from base. At 100 feet away, the cargo bay door of the transport plane groaned open, revealing a single casket draped in the Union Jack. It looked impossibly small against the vast, cold metal interior, a stark reminder of the life it carried home. No crowds gathered, no cameras flashed. Just Carter and 4 other servicemen, their boots rooted to the ground, standing in a silence louder than any trumpet's call. Carter, his face weathered but resolute, stepped forward first. The bearskin cap cast a familiar shadow over his eyes, but beneath it burned a purpose deeper than routine. At 42, he'd marched in countless ceremonies, parades, dignitary escorts, the polished drills of Buckingham Palace. But this was different. This was personal. The casket held Captain Michael Thompson, a 28-year-old soldier killed 3 weeks ago in Syria. The flag, meticulously folded, shimmered under the gray London sky, a symbol of a promise Carter had made years ago. The distance to the terminal entrance, roughly 100 feet, felt like a sacred path, each step a tribute to a life cut short. The other guards, 2 from the Coldstream Company, 2 from the RAF, fell into formation without a word. Their movements were precise, honed by decades of training, yet no drill could prepare them for the weight of this moment. As they lifted the casket, the handles solid under Carter's gloved hands, the world seemed to pause. The tarmac stretched ahead, a quiet stage for a procession no one had planned to witness. At 5 feet 10 inches, Carter stood tall, his posture unyielding, but his heart carried the burden of a vow he never thought he'd keep. Inside Terminal 3, the hum of international travel buzzed on. Announcements in 3 languages, the clatter of luggage, the faint scent of coffee and jet fuel. Passengers rushed past, unaware of the 5 men in uniform moving slowly toward the main concourse, their boots echoing in a rhythm as old as military tradition. The casket, elevated about 3 feet off the ground, drew no immediate attention, but Carter's eyes remained fixed ahead, locked on the far end of the terminal, some 200 feet away. There, he knew, Major Robert Thompson, Michael's father, waited, a man whose own service had shaped Carter's career. This wasn't just a mission. It was a sacred act of remembrance. The London sky loomed darker, but Carter marched on, each step a testament to honor, duty, and a soldier's final journey home. As Sergeant John Carter led the honor guard across the tarmac, the weight of the casket in his hands echoed the burden in his heart. The 100-foot journey from the plane to Heathrow's Terminal 3, described moments ago, was more than a march. It was a pilgrimage, a silent vow carried through the gathering dusk. Now, as the terminal's fluorescent lights loomed closer, roughly 200 feet ahead, Carter's mind drifted to a promise forged years ago, a promise that made this moment achingly personal. At 42, his weathered face bore the scars of service, but his eyes, sharp beneath the bearskin cap, held a fire kindled by loyalty and memory. This wasn't just about duty, it was about family, not of blood, but of bond. Carter's connection to the Thompson family ran deep, rooted in a mentorship that shaped his career. Major Robert Thompson, now 65, had been his company commander at Sandhurst when Carter was a brash 22-year-old lieutenant, all confidence and no wisdom. Robert, then 45, had a presence that could silence a room with a glance. Over late-night talks in the mess hall, 5 feet from flickering candles, Robert taught Carter what service truly meant. "The uniform doesn't define you, John," he'd said, his voice steady as granite. "It's what you carry inside it. Honor, sacrifice, the promises you keep when no one's watching." That wisdom crystallized one evening 20 years ago at Carter's promotion ceremony. The room buzzed with laughter, but Robert pulled him aside, his eyes drifting to his son, Michael, then a 10-year-old playing 50 feet away with other officers' children. Michael, even then, had the spark of a soldier. "If anything happens to my boy," Robert said, his voice low, almost a whisper, "promise me you'll bring him home right. Not just home, John. Right." Carter nodded, sealing a vow soldiers make in the quiet margins of their lives, never expecting to fulfill it. Why does such a promise matter? Because in the military, trust is currency, and a soldier's word is their bond, paid in moments like this. Now, at 28, Michael Thompson lay in the casket Carter carried, killed in Syria 3 weeks prior. The Union Jack, draped 3 feet above the ground, was no mere symbol. It was a testament to a life given for others. Carter's heart pounded, not from the weight of the casket, but from the weight of that old promise. Could he honor it fully, here, in a bustling terminal where indifference threatened to drown out reverence? The tension built with every step, the terminal's chaos, announcements, footsteps, the clatter of luggage closing in like a storm. Carter's resolve hardened. This was more than a mission. It was a debt to a mentor, a tribute to a fallen son, and a stand against a world that too often forgets. Sergeant John Carter's heart still carried the weight of his promise to Major Robert Thompson, a vow forged in the quiet of a decades-old memory, as described moments ago. Each step through Heathrow's Terminal 3, some 200 feet from the entrance, was a testament to that bond. The casket of Captain Michael Thompson held steady in his gloved hands. The Union Jack, draped 3 feet above the polished floor, shimmered under the terminal's harsh lights, a beacon of honor in a sea of chaos. Yet, as Carter's resolve burned brighter, a storm was brewing, one that threatened to challenge the sanctity of this sacred march. The terminal pulsed with life. Announcements blared, travelers jostled, the scent of coffee and jet fuel hung heavy. Carter's eyes, fixed on the distant gate 50 feet ahead, caught a figure cutting through the crowd. William Harris, the terminal supervisor, emerged like a shadow of bureaucracy, his blue lanyard swinging with purpose. At 48, Harris's hunched frame and tablet-clutching grip screamed a man married to procedure, his jaw set in a way that spelled trouble. From 30 feet away, Carter sensed the confrontation looming, a clash between duty and indifference that could unravel everything. Harris stepped into their path, his voice sharp. "Gentlemen, halt right there." The honor guard stopped with chilling precision, not a jolt, not a waver, the casket steady as if guided by an unseen force. Silence fell, heavy as the 100-foot tarmac they'd crossed outside. Why does such a moment matter? Because it pits human values against rigid systems. Carter, embodying a soldier's honor, faced Harris, whose authority stemmed from clipboards and metrics. The crowd, sensing the tension, slowed, their murmurs fading into a collective held breath. "I'm William Harris, terminal supervisor," he said, tapping his tablet. "This procession isn't cleared for peak traffic. Take the service corridor, 200 feet that way." His words, calling Michael's casket a situation, struck like a blade. Carter's voice, low and deliberate, cut back. "This soldier died for his country. He won't be shuffled through a back hallway like luggage." The logic was unassailable. A hero's sacrifice demands respect, not expediency. Harris, undeterred, pressed closer, his tone sharper. "I've got 300 passengers deplaning. Efficiency matters." The air crackled as Carter stood firm, 5 feet 10 inches of unyielding resolve. Then Harris made his fatal error. Desperate to assert control, he reached for the Union Jack, his fingers inches from the flag. Carter's hand shot out, seizing Harris's wrist with a grip like iron, stopping him cold. "You do not touch that flag," he said, his voice a blade slicing through the terminal's din. Time froze. Passengers gasped, phones rose, and the standoff teetered on the edge of chaos, the promise to Michael hanging in the balance. The air in Heathrow's Terminal 3 crackled with tension, the echo of Sergeant John Carter's words, "You do not touch that flag," still ringing as we left the standoff with William Harris moments ago. Carter's iron grip had stopped the supervisor's hand just inches from the Union Jack, draped 3 feet above the floor on Captain Michael Thompson's casket. Now, as the honor guard stood resolute, 50 feet from Gate 38, the terminal seemed to hold its breath. What began as a bureaucratic clash was transforming into something far greater, a moment that would ripple through the crowd, binding strangers in a shared reverence. The terminal, moments ago a chaotic swirl of travelers 200 feet across, began to still. A businessman, 10 feet from the currency exchange, glanced up from his phone, his annoyance melting into awe. He stepped aside, his briefcase forgotten. Why does this shift matter? Because it reveals a universal truth. Even in our distracted lives, the sight of sacrifice can awaken something primal. something human. A mother, 15 feet away, pulled her 2 children close, not out of fear but out of instinct. Her son, maybe 8, whispered, "Mom, why are they so serious?" Her reply, thick with emotion, carried across the quieting concourse. "They're carrying a hero, sweetheart, someone who gave everything." Words spread like wildfire without a single shout. Heads turned, conversations died. A gate agent, 20 feet from her desk, placed a hand over her heart, her clipboard dangling. An elderly man, wearing a veteran's cap 30 feet away, removed it, standing straighter than he had in years. The crowd's mood hardened against Harris, who stood frozen, his tablet clutched like a shield. "Disgraceful," a woman near the duty-free shop 25 feet off hissed. "That's a soldier," a teenager muttered, his voice sharp with disdain. Phones emerged, not for selfies but to capture a moment that demanded witnessing. This wasn't mere curiosity. It was a collective reckoning, a community forming in real time around a shared value. Respect. Carter, 42, felt the shift, his 5'10" frame steady as the casket remained level. The logic was clear. Harris's attempt to reroute the procession through a 200-foot service corridor had insulted a sacrifice that deserved honor, not efficiency. The crowd's reaction wasn't just anger. It was a defense of something sacred, a reminder that society thrives when it honors its protectors. Passengers pressed closer, forming a loose circle 10 feet around the guard, their silence louder than the terminal's usual din. A child's cry faded. An announcement paused. The moment teetered on the edge of history, as strangers became witnesses to a truth larger than themselves. Would Harris back down, or would this spark a greater clash? The answer hung in the air, heavy as the flag itself. The terminal's air, charged with the crowd's newfound reverence from moments ago, seemed to shimmer as Sergeant John Carter and his honor guard pressed forward, the Union Jack on Captain Michael Thompson's casket glowing 3 feet above the floor. The collective gasp of passengers, 10 feet away, still echoed from their defense of this sacred march, as described in the swelling tide of respect that had humbled William Harris. Now, with Gate 38 just 50 feet ahead, the procession neared its heart-wrenching destination. The chaos of Heathrow's Terminal 3, 200 feet of bustling travelers, faded into a hallowed silence, as if the world itself paused to honor a promise kept. Carter, 42, his 5'10" frame steady under the weight of duty, locked eyes on a lone figure near the gate. Major Robert Thompson, 65, stood in full-dress uniform, his silver hair gleaming, his chest heavy with ribbons earned over decades. His posture, rigid as steel, betrayed no tears, but his clasped hands trembled faintly, a silent testament to a father's grief. Why does this moment resonate? Because it embodies the essence of service, not in medals or parades, but in the quiet, unbreakable bonds forged between soldiers. Carter's vow, made 20 years ago 50 feet from a lively ceremony, was no mere words. It was a covenant, a soldier's pledge to bring Michael home right. The guards' boots clicked in unison, closing the final 30 feet with precision that masked the ache in their hearts. The crowd, now a silent circle 15 feet around, watched in awe. A girl, 8 years old, raised a tiny hand in salute, her school uniform swaying, mimicking a gesture learned from stories of valor. Her grandfather, a Royal British Legion pin glinting 20 feet away, pressed his hand to his heart, his eyes fixed on the casket. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a communal act of remembrance, proof that society's soul endures when it honors its fallen. The logic is clear. Michael's sacrifice and Carter's fidelity to his promise reminded everyone that duty transcends bureaucracy, uniting strangers in shared humanity. As the casket came to a gentle stop before Robert, no words passed between Carter and the Major. A nod from Thompson, barely perceptible, met Carter's steady gaze, a silent pact fulfilled. The moment hung heavy, the terminal's silence louder than any bugle. Would this quiet exchange heal a father's loss? No, but it honored a son's legacy, sealing a 20-year-old vow with dignity. Carter stepped back, 5 feet, giving the family their space, his heart heavy yet light with duty done. The crowd held its vigil, their phones lowered, their breaths soft. This was the climax of sacrifice, not in conflict, but in connection. A fleeting, sacred pause before the hearse, waiting 100 feet away, would carry Michael on his final journey. As the honor guard stepped back, 5 feet from Captain Michael Thompson's casket, the silence in Heathrow's Terminal 3, so palpable moments ago, lingered like a sacred echo. Major Robert Thompson's nod to Sergeant John Carter, described in that tender exchange at Gate 38, 50 feet from the crowd, had sealed a 20-year-old promise with unspoken grace. Now, as the hearse waited 100 feet away, ready to carry Michael on his final 200-foot journey, the terminal's reverence held firm. Yet this moment, witnessed by passengers 15 feet around, was more than a farewell. It was a mirror, reflecting truths about duty, honor, and the choices we make when faced with sacrifice. William Harris, the supervisor, stood alone, 30 feet from the concourse's edge, his tablet dangling like a relic of a battle lost. His attempt to reroute the procession through a 200-foot service corridor, to treat a hero's return as a mere situation, had crumbled under the weight of collective outrage. Did he learn something? Perhaps. His eyes, once sharp with authority, now flickered with something softer. Shame, maybe, or the dawning realization of his misstep. Why does his defeat matter? Because it exposes a flaw in our systems. Bureaucracy, blind to human cost, often clashes with values like respect and remembrance. Harris's silence, as he faded into the crowd, spoke louder than any apology could. This story's power lies in its challenge to us all. Carter, 42, 5 feet 10 inches of unyielding resolve, honored a vow made to Robert, 65, because soldiers understand that promises are the currency of trust. The crowd's shift from indifference to unity, 10 feet from the casket, proved that even strangers can recognize sacrifice when it's laid bare. But what does this mean for us? It argues that true service isn't in ceremonies or titles. It's in the quiet acts, carrying a fallen comrade, standing firm against disrespect, that define a society's soul. The logic is undeniable. When we honor those who give everything, we affirm our shared humanity, binding us beyond the 200 feet of a terminal's chaos. Yet, questions linger, sharp as the silence that followed Carter's stand. What would you have done in Harris's place, 20 feet from a hero's casket? Would you cling to procedure or step aside for honor? More crucially, do we, in our daily rush, truly grasp what it means when a soldier like Michael, just 28, trades parade grounds for battlefields knowing he might not return? The tension of this moment as the crowd held its breath demands we reflect. Carter's duty was done, but the story's weight endures, urging us to value the unseen promises kept in the dark. As the hearse pulled away, this wasn't just Michael's end. It was a call to live with the courage to choose respect over indifference, always. This story of Sergeant John Carter, carrying Captain Michael Thompson home through Heathrow's chaos, isn't just a moment. It's a challenge to us all. As the casket moved 200 feet, uniting strangers 10 feet apart in reverence, it showed what duty truly means. Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? Is it a bustling city, a quiet town, or somewhere far across the globe? More than that, what stirred you most? Was it Carter's unyielding stand 5 feet from the flag, or the crowd's silent salute? Maybe you've known someone who served, or you've faced a choice between rules and respect. Share your thoughts, your stories. Let's build a community that honors these truths. If this moved you, hit that like button to show your support for those who serve without fanfare. Don't miss tomorrow's story, another tale of courage waiting 24 hours away. Subscribe, ring the bell, and join us daily for moments that remind us what binds us together. Your voice matters. Comment now and let's keep this flame of remembrance burning bright.